I think joy is underrated and it should be a big driver of our careers and our hobbies. And, like what did they really enjoy? Where did they feel most alive? Where did they feel like they were really gelling and using their skills? Or where did they feel so overwhelmed they never want to do that again, like me in calculus? You know.
Hey friends, this is Podcast Ruined by a Software Engineer. On this episode, I get to talk to Lindsey Dixon, Vice President of Product and Innovation at NAF, a non-profit organization offering career readiness programs in over 600 academies all across the United States. If you enjoy Podcast Ruined by a Software Engineer, don't forget to hit the follow button on your podcast app so you don't miss out on the new episodes. And you can pick up podcast merch at perrytiu.com/shop. Enjoy the episode. Welcome back to another episode of Podcast Ruined by a Software Engineer. With me today is Lindsey Dixon, Head of Product at NAF. Lindsey, how are you today?
I'm pretty good. I can't complain. How are you, Perry?
I'm doing well, and this has been in the making. I keep on saying this, that it's because your footprint of you, NAF, everybody at the org is significant. Over 100,000 students, 500,000 students have gone through the programs. I can't wait to dive into it. I'm already jumping the starting gun, if anything. But even before all of that, who is Lindsey and what is NAF?
So Lindsey is Lindsey Dixon. I'm the VP of product at NAF, and I've been in education and educational technology for about 20 years. I started out in technology in the U.S. Air Force, and I became a high school teacher in the Bronx for several years. And then my career really started to focus in on workforce development and career readiness with amazing nonprofits like Year Up and Urban Assembly. So Lindsey is someone who likes to be of service. She's a creative problem solver. She likes sports. And NAF is a 45-year-old national nonprofit, and it is a really amazing organization that brings together businesses and communities and high school students to help them become future ready. So we've got this fantastic track record of success, and kids and students, teachers all over the country that we've been able to work with and partner with amazing businesses like Lenovo and KPMG and these really great companies who care about making a difference in education and in communities. And so, yeah, it's a great org. I've been here for almost 3 years and have known of NAF for well before I ever got to join. So I'm really fortunate to be a part of it now.
And I think we're even more fortunate to hear about it because we're always going to go a little bit behind the scenes of what happens, of course, on the front lines of seeing students going into a lot of these academies, but also everything that takes to run it. I think it's not easy to think about having this national footprint. I keep on saying that, how do you keep the consistency, but how do you keep the engagement, the excitement? And I can't wait to get into all of that. But maybe just a bit of context, actually, because I do know you have your own journey as well in terms of you already mentioned working in education. And shout out to the Bronx. I did live there for a while as well.
Shout out to the Bronx.
Maybe even from yourself, I guess, where would you, I guess, consider home in that case? Where did you grow up?
Great question. I grew up in Pensacola, Florida, so that is home to me. Um, I left to join the Air Force, and so that I left when I was 19 years old, right after 9/11, and that took me to exciting places like Nebraska. No offense to Nebraska, but it was just a little different to than growing up in Florida and the beaches. A lot of snow, a lot of corn, really nice people, but it wasn't the most exciting place for me to be, and so I got to study full time and get my associates and my bachelor's degree while I was doing full time military technology and training work. So that was excellent. I really was able to avail myself of the educational opportunities in the GI Bill, and yeah, but home is Pensacola, even though I still kind of feel like a New Yorker or New Yorker. I lived in Brooklyn and the Bronx and all of that for the better part of 20 years. So I actually just moved back less than 2 years ago to Pensacola. So real cultural shift.
The thing that comes with it is just new perspective, if anything. And I do want to dive into the bit where you were saying you had a background with teaching as well. And even when you're talking about so much technology at the end of the day, but maybe in terms of influences, growing up in multiple environments at the end of the day, was it already there? Did you have a lot of, I guess, teaching minded people around you, or was it tech people around you? Or what was that I guess, obvious influence growing up?
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever thought about it, but it's probably a mix of both. So I had an aunt who, Aunt Diana, shout out to Aunt Diana. She actually worked for Pensacola Naval Air Station, so NAS. And I don't even know exactly what she did, but it was something with computers and technology because I remember in the 80s, so I'm dating myself. Um, she brought home like one of the early Apple computers, and we got to play like matching games with it, like memory games on it, and then eventually like Oregon Trail. And I remember thinking that that was so cool that my aunt, and again, back in the 80s, it wasn't like tech even now is the most woman dominated field, but in the 80s, imagine how much less so. And so, she would come and have access to these really cool gadgets and technology. And I just really thought that was awesome. And my grandmother, my granny, shout out to Granny, um, was a teacher, a special education teacher for a few years. She was a military wife, so they moved around a lot. She wasn't always working, but one of her jobs, I just remember her telling me these stories of the kids, and she remembered their names, and she remembered what was like special about them and their interactions. So, yeah, I guess I've never really thought about it, but I guess both of those influences on me were pretty close to home at a pretty formative age. So even if I hadn't really consciously thought about it, I did have it right there in my family to give me a little bit of that influence.
I absolutely love it, especially the part you mentioned Oregon Trail. Because the
Oh
thing
yeah.
is, people who listen to this show know this has been mentioned a couple of times across many episodes. So, not saying that I played it personally, but I think it's
Oh, it's
definitely
so
something
good. You got to go get dysentery in Oregon Trail. You haven't lived until you've died from dysentery in Oregon Trail.
I'm gonna go find. Was it on floppy disk?
Yeah, it was on the little floppy disks. Yep. I got a early computer too. I don't even remember what type of PC it was. It would have been like late 80s, early 90s. And you had the floppy disks. And my little niece was over, I think it was my niece Ashley, and she had those stencils that you color with, like you put the pen inside the stencil to draw and trace. She shoved that in the floppy disk slot, and then I couldn't get it out. Like I couldn't use my brand new used computer anymore. So yeah, floppy disks, that takes me back. Your listeners are not going to have any idea what a floppy disk is, but they should look it up.
Oh yeah, like it takes 7 floppy disks to install like 5 megs of something. That's always a fun
I've got
part that we.
old Xena fan fiction saved on like reams of floppy disks. Like I used to carry them around in like big cases. That's how old I am. I'm only in my early 40s, y'all. I'm not that old.
I wouldn't mind if we just spend the next 2 hours talking about how some of the floppy disks has like the springy part, right? I don't know if you remember, there's the springy part to them, and it's always you didn't even have to put the floppy disk into the machine to play with it. You can literally just like
Exactly.
play with that springy part. Anyways, that's always fun. You see, like I really do think about those moments, right? Because obviously, like a lot of what we do today in tech and everything, we think about is that like we're just playing around with stuff. If anything, growing up playing around technology, but also the teaching part is super super important. When you, I guess, like went to the Air Force, was that the intent of like purely going into tech? Because something that was really interesting is that like I personally don't even know how they usually split out. I guess like the paths at Air Force, right? Some people will be like,
It's the test called the ASVAB. So you take a test called the ASVAB, the ASVAB, um, and they split you into careers based on your scores. And so I scored pretty well in the electrical, and surprisingly the mechanical. I don't even know if at the time I knew how to jump a car battery correctly, so I don't know how I scored high on that. And my strongest was communication. So I went in, I eventually got my bachelor's in English. I've always wanted to write or to do communications work. And when I thought about becoming a teacher, I knew I wanted to be an English teacher. I love to read books and stories and write and like tap into creativity and help young people tap into their creativity. So I knew I wanted to go in that field, but they didn't really have much for me at the time. It's kind of like what jobs are available in this moment? What does the Air Force need? So at the time, they needed people to be satellite communications technicians, which is what I became. So I was flying satellites safely from the ground, making sure the signals were all encrypted correctly, and that the satellites were where they were supposed to be. And it sounds a bit more exciting than it is. But I got to be a technical trainer while I was there too, because I have that aptitude for training, which actually my first ever job was at Chuck E. Cheese, and they quickly made me a new hire trainer, which was awesome. I just got to train the new hires on the Chuck E. Cheese birthday dance and like how to handle the menu and how to do party hosting. And so that was technically my first teaching job, right? Like at 16 and 17 years old, I was like teaching other people how to do the Chuck E. Cheese game. And then similarly in the Air Force, they made me part-time a technical trainer, and I get to create training programs, and I really liked it. I just loved, I guess I had that bug for teaching. I love seeing somebody's eyes light up when I have something that I can do and I can help them do it. or something I can't do, but I can still help them do it just because you don't have to be a master of it yourself. So yeah, I guess that's where the kind of teaching bug started. But I didn't go into the Air Force for tech per se. It really was more open. I just wanted anything that would kind of get me out of town and provide some education and stability. So I went in open. Some people sit and wait for like a year or more to get the exact career field they want.
To say that you're probably one of the few people who've had their code or their technology got into space and everything, that's so cool at the end of
Yeah,
the
it's
day.
pretty cool.
Can I ask the geeky question in terms of like, even when you were doing those like projects on satellite and everything, what was it written in? Was it like assembly? I don't like C plus
It's
plus,
old. Some of
or
that stuff is still in like COBOL or Fortran. I mean, this is imagine like underground bunkers, and I can't, talk too specifically or I'll lose my military clearance. No, I'm just kidding. I don't need it anymore. All the secrets are coming out on this podcast, y'all. No, just kidding. But they have these massive mainframes. They're gigantic. They're the sizes of the rooms. And so, some of this stuff is decades old, but still works quite well for what we needed to do. So it was really old technology. Even in the 2000s when I was in, the technology is still from the 70s and 80s and 90s, these older, pretty big computers and encryption machines and yeah, the kind of terminals to plan and plot out and make sure that the satellites were like getting their uploads and their updates like at the right time. But it was like, yeah, a small little computer and gigantic mainframes. And yeah, most of it, I mean, some of it was written on like, yeah, Fortran, COBOL. Nothing as sophisticated. Python, I don't think, was like a twinkle in their eye yet.
oh yeah, I think even when you're mentioning like mainframes, people like not I'm saying that I'm super familiar with it, but they're stuck to the wall. They're
Oh
literally
yeah,
these like
yeah. You're just surrounded by these gigantic furniture pieces of software and these huge satellite dishes outside. And yeah, it feels like you're stepping back in time when you step in, one of the labs. And not to say, I mean, the Air Force has some of the most sophisticated technology on the planet, but for what that was, we just didn't need, super high tech, cutting edge things like what we had for the grid of satellites around the Earth, especially the ones on Earth, not the ones in space, but like the satellite dishes, for instance. Um, those were old and they still work really well. And if it's not broke, don't fix it.
well, I mean, till today, a lot of like finance and everything still runs COBOL, and maybe a bit of Fortran, I believe.
Yeah,
So
some
as
of
you
the
were
banks
saying,
still are running Fortran. One of my other nonprofits I worked for year up, there were some big banks that were trying to get us to train young people to learn Fortran because so many of the college grads coming out had never even heard of it. So they needed that kind of entry level pipeline of talent who could code Fortran and understand it. And so, yeah, there's some of these legacy things and systems that are still out there that need people to run them and update them. And it would cost the banks or some of these places so much more to switch over because everything is just like so established in that older language.
I thought it was a lore, if anything, or like some like folklore, if anything, that people were like worried about the dying breed of COBOL developers.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's not nearly as much as you're going to get for anybody that's doing Python and JavaScript and all of those, more modern languages and stacks. But, there's definitely still some folks out there.
But I think even just the story that you're mentioning, that like that connection, that relevance is still like present today. Oh, I absolutely love it on that. So, but even your academic journey, you've definitely taken loads of leaps and bounds and everything in there. When you went to, I believe you did your degree at University of Maryland. Shout out to University of Maryland for your BA during that time, and then I believe you also did a master's after. Was that intentional as well, or was that something that you were just keep on pursuing because that was really your drive of just like learning at that point?
Yeah, I love to learn. I'd say if I have a superpower, it's rapid learning. So if I'm given a new project about, how to use AI to terraform Mars, like I don't know anything about that, but by tomorrow I will, if I need to. And so that's definitely my superpower. And I come from a long line of like really wonderful people who just, had a lot of economic miss opportunity or lack of economic opportunity. So like most of my family all have like GEDs or never even finished high school. So it was really important for me to go out and pursue my education. So yeah, I got the associates and the bachelor's while I was still in the Air Force, and then I got and went and pursued two masters after that. And I'm actually finishing up my doctorate now in education and focusing on artificial intelligence and career education. So yeah, it's been quite a journey, but I don't know if I'll ever stop. I don't know if I want a second doctorate, but I guess I'm a glutton for punishment because I love being in school or getting new certifications. I just don't like to like rest on my laurels and let my brain get too rusty.
One thing I do want to dive a little bit into, you spoke about maybe Teach for America as well, and then all these like really significant, like the New York Department of Education, the NYC Department of Education. These are absolutely great environments to be in. What did you do there? And yeah, even just like the day to day, what did that look like when you were there?
Yeah, I pinch myself sometimes, Perry, because I grew up really poor and didn't know anybody. I didn't have much of a social network, and that's something that NAF really does a great job on, is focusing on that like social capital and helping young people connect to business professionals. I unfortunately didn't have a NAF, but that's been my passion ever since, is helping young people figure that out. So yeah, I pinched myself that I got to work on projects with the mayor's office and some of the heads of the Department of Education in New York, which was what absolutely one of the best centers for innovation in education, I believe. Like, we were doing some really transformative things there with the DOE and the mayor's office for middle school CTE, and like figuring out what a middle school career readiness program might look like. I did game-based learning there, and teaching teachers actually how to use games to teach students computer science through the DOE's Summer Institute, like where they really work with teachers to help them innovate. Um, yeah, I got to do some like phenomenal projects over the last few years, and I kind of, accidentally fell into it. One of my professors when I was in college helped me get into Year Up, which was really the start of my big kid career. And then from there, I got to meet people, but even though I had some great colleges on my resume, I didn't have that great social network. And so I got really lucky to meet even one or two people that was able to connect me to one or two other people. So I think that's, some of the message for listeners who, if they're sitting there thinking like, oh, I don't have a great social network, or like, oh, I don't have like all of Lindsay's degrees. Well, I didn't either. You just got to start to stack them together one by one, find one person that can open one door for you, and then turn around and you open a door for somebody else, which I'm really proud to have done a lot throughout my career.
You're exposed, you were given a big toolbox of so many great things, right? And you made so much good out of it, of being able to leverage that. But how do you pick and choose which tools, I guess, if you're going to be like working to devise like a program for, let's say, like a focus on comp sci for students just of any background, any color, any kind of stuff like that? How did that work as part of like whether it's the Department of Education or Teach for America? Like, what was the context again? Was it free reign to be like, we're all gonna learn for loops and that's what we're gonna do, or was it something different than that?
I've definitely gravitated. I think one of the most important things somebody can figure out is, not just what drives them. So I know my purpose in life. I know I'm here to help other people and to work on equity in education. Like, I figured that out at a pretty young age. But there's probably millions of people that have that same purpose. You have to figure out your methodology, right? You have to figure out the way in which you're going to operate. And I've gravitated to places that allow me to have a great deal of autonomy. Some people really work well within rules and heuristics and specific lanes. And I really like a blank sheet of paper. So I've been really attracted to the opportunities where they didn't tell me, yes, you have to teach for loops and you have to teach conditionals here and it must be done in this way. I've been brought in mostly with that like kind of creative control to say like, what should we teach, and let's go and do some discovery and exploration, and really deeply empathizing with our end users, usually students in this case, but sometimes teachers, like figuring out what are their unsolved needs, and what do they want, and how can technology be a piece of this solution, because technology is the means, right? It's not the goal itself. So you don't ever start with the technology if you can help it. If you have a massive grant or a big funder that wants you to use a certain piece of proprietary technology, of course, you're going to have to end up using that. But I always think it's better to start with that kind of blank canvas of what is a really fantastic opportunity that we can do that will create value. And so that, is part of what we do at NAF, and the project I'm working on now, it's called NoPro. We started with a blank slate. I was not told you have to develop any particular thing. It could be an app, a website, a widget, but we just want to bring more students work-based learning opportunities virtually, because we know that that's something like an internship is really hard to scale. Only 2% of kids in America get an internship while they're still in high school. 2%. Um, and so I was given that kind of carte blanche, blank slate to say, go fix this problem. Use technology to do it, but I got to kind of decide what technology and what does that look like. And so I've been really fortunate to find those things in my careers, but I definitely encourage your listeners to think about, yeah, not just their purpose, but how do they want to operate? Do they want to be in that lead role like I am and be really willing to take big risks and have big accountability? Do they want to work more on a team? Do they want to just kind of play in like whatever stack they're comfortable with, or do they want to always be learning something new? That's really powerful once you kind of realize that about yourself. Then you can find the jobs that will let you really hone in on those superpowers and the ways that you like to work.
One thing I do want to dive into before we jump into NAF actually is the Urban Assembly. You mentioned that earlier, and that's a name that like a lot of people recognize as well. Was that also? I need to double check. Was that also a non-profit as well, or how does that work? Because I feel like a lot of this, like, it's good to clarify.
Yeah, and I've spent most of my life very intentionally in nonprofits. It's just the place that I like to call home. There's nothing wrong with for profits. My wife works in for profits her whole life, and I've pretty much worked in nonprofits. So yeah, the Urban Assembly is a nonprofit. They're a network of public schools in New York City that serve 23 public schools there, and then schools around the country, and really focus in on social emotional learning, college and career readiness, and academics and math and helping students achieve, and certainly their students do achieve much higher records of high school graduation and college going. And so yeah, that's a phenomenal organization started by a dear friend of mine, Richard Kahn, who hired me there. But they do great work. The only reason I really left the Urban Assembly was just because I wanted to have a bigger impact. And really, the only place that you can go bigger from Urban Assembly is NAF. NAF does very similar things, but they've been around longer and they're much more distributed across the country, just a lot more students. But I'm really, really grateful for my time at UA. I got to build some really cool things there.
Going into NAF, that like, I mean, even before we go into like everything you do at NAF, in general, could you give us maybe like the concept behind NAF in terms of was it mostly academies or even did I get that right to begin with?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the concept. If you think about traditional public schools in America, we've been very much locked into a model that was created in the late 1800s and then the early 1900s, something called the Carnegie Unit. Everything became about, it was called seat time. So, how long was your butt in the seat? For a 45-minute class, you must have learned X amount of stuff. So, classes are going to be this long, a bell will ring. This was all like old school assembly line, late 1800s, early 1900s America. And most schools haven't changed a ton in the way that they are structured and run. Um, since then, or at least the traditional American school hasn't. And so, 45 years ago, NAF started this idea of what if we took that American high school, and instead of just having it be about how long are they in these classes that are all random and you're taking a tiny sample of little bits of everything, what if we started an Academy of Finance? What if within the high school experience you could almost have a college major like experience, like a high school major? And so we'll bring in business professionals, we'll help the teachers learn how to teach more advanced topics in finance and accounting, and we'll really put them on track to get internships and to potentially pursue this as a career. And from that one Academy of Finance, now we have thousands of different um, academies and in hospitality and tourism and healthcare and education and finance, they just keep branching off into whatever the labor market demands. But that's kind of the idea, that you'll structure your school around these academies. You can have multiple academies in a school to give your students choice, right? Like, I would not have wanted the Academy of Finance, but I might have really liked the Academy of Engineering. Or some schools, like I said, have the Academy of Education. And so while I'm taking those courses, my school also is building out an advisory board so that there's lots of different local and national professionals that are going to come and, help train my teachers or give us internship opportunities or come in for career day. So we're going to have that connection to the workforce, which is really just so important. So yeah, I think you got it right. I mean, in a nutshell, the academies is a big part of what NAF has been and still is.
When does this happen in a student's, I guess, like day to day, in the sense of is it before school, middle of the school, like how do I experience it?
Great question. It is their school. So they would be a part of this academy all throughout the day. It's not something they have to do extra and like wake up early and do before school. And it's not something I have to like stay late to do. It just is school. NAF is where opportunity begins, we like to say. And so, like, that opportunity is the moment the student walks in the door. Their whole experience is flavored by these different career fields and career tracks and experiences. Certainly within their main courses, you might think of them in other schools as like electives. But these are these concentration classes that they'll get to take throughout the day, for instance, in engineering. But I'd say the best of academies and the best of CTE schools around the country infuse those same topics into English. They'll be writing about fantastic engineers and doing research about engineering projects. And in math, they'll be learning, the geometry or some of the physics principles behind the technology, right? If they were in an engineering academy. So ideally, they're kind of like surrounded in this ecosystem that really is exposing them to this higher level of knowledge. Like, imagine being a 16-year-old and sitting down at an interview and being able to rattle off some of this like vocabulary and knowledge and experience. Like, I didn't have that. I had Chuck E. Cheese. So I wish I had have had NAF.
When you're naming these academy, the finance, hospitality, and tourism, information technology, engineering, and these like specialization, that's something that I keep on saying, that I've gone on these like kind of rant to be like, hey, look, I'm first year of university and I'm still in general like
Yep.
studies, in the sense of like I still don't know what exactly I want. Is it because I don't know what's out there? Largely part of it. Nobody really held my hand to really, direct a bit of that. So maybe from your, I guess, like years of seeing so many different individuals and everything, what's the trend like for somebody to have discovered like more of a specialty early on in their life versus somebody who's really just like by the age of whatever 21 or something at that point starting to specialize? Is there like an impact that I guess like I don't know about?
Well, I mean, there's certainly some data that shows that the earlier we can help kids or students figure this out, the quicker they're going to get through college because they won't have to switch their major a bunch. That'll save them money because then they don't have to have a bunch of credits that don't transfer. And there's definitely correlation with graduation rates. Like, they persist, they graduate in higher number when they feel like they're in the right program. My wife and I always joke that she was told, she came up in the rural South too, a pretty low income person, and didn't know what she wanted to do. And so her mom told her, "Oh, go be an engineer because engineers make money." And so she did 4 years of college for engineering before she realized, I hate this. I don't want to be an engineer. I'll be a terrible engineer. I'm in like Calc 3 and like, these high level maths that she didn't enjoy, even though she's good at math. And then she had to spend 2 more years getting her bachelor's in business administration, which she loves. And she spent her whole career doing like technology business administration. But so it took her 6 years to get a bachelor's. Like, she had family support to persist. She had somebody helping her, have a place to live during the summers and sending her food and things. Like, most students don't have that, or a lot of students don't have that, and they don't stick around for that 6 years. So I do think while we don't want to lock a kid into some destiny while they're still a teenager, that's too confining. And careers are very malleable, and it's more like a story we tell. It's a narrative. It's like a video game. There's side quests, right? There's all these different journeys. So you don't need to lock in like you are a paladin for the rest of your life, like you are an engineer, and you may not ever change that. But if we can figure out while they're still in high school a little bit of what makes them tick, that sense of purpose, that sense of what are my superpowers, and then that knowledge, like you said, Perry, you didn't know what was out there because most kids don't, because schools are shit at it. We don't spend time on this unless you're lucky enough to be in an AF academy or an urban assembly CTE school. Most high schools are just focused on pass your classes, take the SAT, and of course you're going to go to college, whether or not you need it, whether or not your career actually requires some vocational training. But like, you don't spend much time when you're a high school student, even today, getting to explore what's out there. What is forensic psychology? What is forensic accounting? What is forensic cybersecurity? Like, those are three words with forensics that are very, very vastly different things and would attract very different personality types, right? So I do think that's something schools should attend to a lot more. And that trend of, if we can help those juniors and seniors at least figure out good bets, figure out what you don't want to do also. Like, so you're not my wife and doing 4 years of engineering school. Like, help kids figure out at least a good list of what they don't want to do and a short list of what they might want to do. So at least when they're exploring, um, they're more likely to persist. And then colleges need to flip their model too. Like you said, Perry, you're starting out in these general classes. You're not even getting to experience your major. You're in your first year and they're trying to load you up with basically high school 2.0 because they don't believe that you're ready. So they're making you take all these like core classes that don't have anything to do with your major, right? So like, some colleges now have experience with flipping that and letting you start your classes in your first year to make sure you really like it. Get into healthcare, get into cybersecurity. Like, let's let them actually try this And I think some of those models are going to have more success.
Yeah, I mean, like considering the direct impact that you guys have seen in the academies of what people are interested in and what they do after as well, pursue another degree or even get into like a professional vocation like immediately after. Those are definitely like serious outcomes that happen left and right on that. So one thing I probably didn't even mention in my head more than anything is like, how do I sign up for one? I know I'm obviously a little bit older than that, but in the sense of like, for me, I'm always like a geek, we might talk about like the UX of signing up for an academy more than anything, but maybe from that perspective, because I'm sure you guys think about this a lot, right? How do you put this to the hands of so many people around the country, if anything? How do people sign up to now?
Yeah, they just have to reach out to NAF. We have a website, naf.org, naf.org, and there's some information on how to become an academy. It's a pretty simple process, at least to get rolling. And really, we just want to work with teachers and principals and superintendents, and of course, serve students. Um, Anywhere that wants to do this work and that needs this work, which is everywhere, right? So we would the UX of it, or the kind of flow of it, would be you'd get connected with some folks on our team who help new NAF academies be formed, and we would take you through a process of kind of retrofitting your school from that traditional American experience. Or even if you're further along, even if you have some CTE academies but you feel like or CTE school, programs, but you feel like you want to kind of take it to the next level and really have more of that rigor and success. We'd pair you up with folks on our team who do that work every day, who intake new schools and work with school staff and help them learn how to form these NAF academies and work with their local businesses. And so that's a big part of what our staff at NAF actually does all day long.
And of course, we have to talk about the products, if anything. When I was mentioning NAF, like, of course, there's the Academy side to it, where decades over decades, there's like so much traffic and everything. But there's also a lot of cool products that NAF work on, if anything. There's NAF Track, there's NAF Next, there's the Open Data Index for schools, ODIS, if I got that correctly, and NoPro
Yeah.
as well. But maybe like a quick summary of all the products, because I will definitely dive into like Otis if we can, and NoPro as well, because I really geek out on this. But just in general, we spoke about the academies a little bit, but there are way more products to NAF, is there?
Absolutely. I think NAF has been like secretly a part ed tech company for a long time, and I don't know that we've ever like claimed it, but I think we should. We have a lot of products. They're very innovative. They're used by schools across the country. So it may not be the main thing that we do, but it's a really important thing that we do. And also, after the pandemic, or I don't know if we're after the pandemic, but wherever we are relative to the initial pandemic, let's say, with virtual schools and all of that, like so much about education has changed, and so much about the way that we work has to be mediated by technology. Like, we're having this call right now on Google Meets, but most people, I work from home all day, right? Like, I meet people through Zoom. Young people, students, are going to go off into the world where at the very least they're probably going to be hybrid. They're going to be working behind a screen, right? For a lot of the jobs out there. um, so I do think that there's like in some ways we're not going to be able to go back to the world like pre-technology. That's not really going to be a thing. And so NAF is going to continue to have to lead and innovate when it comes to product and tech, because it's just the way that we operate now. Even programs that were usually just like on the ground, face to face, like even that, there are so many products and tools that we've built for our staff and for our schools to help facilitate that, that in-person programming. Even that is hybrid and supported by product.
Do the rest of the products that you mentioned that is being worked on at NAF, do they also integrate as part of the, I guess, like curriculum of these academy in that case? Like, or are those tools mostly for, I guess, like schools to use to adopt like different ways of teaching students at that point? So what's this like integration
Yeah,
between all
great
of them?
question. Most of them, we have a few, like our NAF Track platform and our work-based learning tracker, for instance. Those are absolutely things that are meant to be used by teachers and students and as part of their NAF journey, certainly. So our work-based learning tracker, for instance, we noticed a real gap in the market, or a gap in the field, where most schools are not attending to or looking at like which of their students are getting work-based learning opportunities. At best, there's some very busy, overwhelmed counselor somewhere on a Google sheet or an Excel spreadsheet that might be saying, okay, Perry had 1 hour of a guest speaker today, or Lindsay had a career day in ninth grade, and that's it. and she's a senior now. And that's actually better than a lot of other schools that are not tracking this at all. They're not understanding how insanely important this is to a student's long-term success. So our work-based learning tracker that we've built and our amazing work-based learning team has helped design really is a very user-friendly tool that lets the students and the teachers or academy directors see the impact and the equity of work-based learning within their school. They'll be able to slice and dice the numbers by grade level and gender and race and really see, oh wow, are we unintentionally creating some inequities with who gets access to opportunity? Like that question is a big part of the core of who NAF is. Who gets access to opportunity? It should be every student. And so if you believe that, you should be able to prove that with your data, right? You should be able to take a look and say, "Oh wow, I actually didn't notice that our young men, our male students are not getting internships," for example. And so like how can we correct that? So being data driven is really important. And then there's lots of tools like that out on the market, but I think that one thing that makes NAF's work-based learning tracker a bit unique is we've kind of taken it to the next level where students are really allowed to reflect and have a place to store their learnings and reflections in the tool. Like, what did I learn from that career day in ninth grade? Can I make a quick journal entry almost? Can I make a quick note of like, oh, this person was like a SOC analyst or a system administrator or an anthropologist, whatever it is. And it sounded really cool. And here's the part I liked about it. Like if it was a year ago, you may not remember, but if you made this note and if you reflected on it, that's really powerful. We also have the ability for internship managers to reflect on and assess student skills, which is something that's really quite innovative in the field is has not yet caught up with. So we're some of the ones leading the way on that. But it's so important for a teacher or somebody that cares about a student to see like, oh, Lindsay's internship manager said she needs to work on her communication skills. She really should work on slowing down when she speaks, which I know. Here's her strengths and like getting that kind of like 360 more holistic picture of who a student is really powerful. So that's a product that is newer for NAF, but one we're really excited about.
I could definitely just like see behind how a student would be excited to keep track of something. I think when we talk about like there's already like very very lame and simple like young people like myself sometimes love to keep a journal. Journal is something that keeps track of it. And if you think about that in the perspective of like, wait, if journals has been a thing for the past millennia, if anything,
Right.
people do like keeping track of stuff. Why can't we just make that easier for people living the school system? I keep on saying like on GitHub where you get to like see your
Yep.
track of how many commits every day on it. It's exciting, at least for the geeks like me out there. But that
Exactly. And
progress
getting to
is
see
so
your
fun.
record of it.
Exactly, right? And on that day, you can see like what commit happened over there. And the other part to it is that like I don't know if it's true or not, but this like maybe this discreditation, if even that's word, of like young people don't want to keep track of stuff or like they don't care about like everything. That's not true as far as I can tell. People really do take feedback and taking their improvements seriously over time.
Well, and Gen Z and Gen Alpha are some of the most like journaling kids of all time. They're just doing it through video, right? Like they catalog everything. My nieces and nephews, and some of them live with me, like sit and film while they're brushing their teeth, they're folding their laundry. They record everything and make a record of this. And so, I hope they'll do some reflecting on those things, like which of those activities brings them joy. I think joy is underrated and it should be a big driver of our careers and our hobbies. And, like what did they really enjoy? Where did they feel most alive? Where did they feel like they were really gelling and using their skills? Or where did they feel so overwhelmed they never want to do that again, like me in calculus? So like, yeah, but I think kids, students should be given more of that opportunity to really like kind of like make that record, remind themselves like, oh yeah, I did enjoy that. Or you're like, oh yeah, I hated that. Why am I still majoring in this thing? I did that internship and I didn't like it. And it wasn't just because I didn't like my boss, but I didn't like the work. Like that's important. Stop, have that reflection. Like again, I think that's something that separates our tool from a lot of the other ones out there that again kind of becomes a little bit rote or formulaic. It's a checkbox. Sometimes schools get funding for making sure that students get these types of work-based learning and career opportunities. And so they have to track it legally and it can become just a part of the machine. But if you could just take that next step with it and let it be something that a student has that sense of ownership of, like, this is part of my journey. I'm going to catalog it, take ownership, like, really help steer this course, show up with all this data and say, okay, here's me. Like you asked me in the very beginning, who is Lindsay? You're like, this is me. I'm Courtney. And here's all the experiences that I've had, and I want you, guidance counselor, career counselor, college counselor, to kind of help me figure out like what training do I do after high school. Like that's where they should be sitting down to meet the adult with like some experiences of their own that can inform and help. Otherwise, with 500 students or 1,000 students, I think the ratio is like 100 to maybe 450 or more of like the guidance counselor to amount of students. That person doesn't have time to really get to know anybody, and that's the person that's supposed to help them pick out their career. That's ridiculous. Like there's no way that that is going to be successful at scale unless you have a really robust system for helping the young people do that exploration, like in an AF Academy, and kind of record all of these things and reflect on them and meet people and have informational interviews, and then show up and say, okay, I'm pretty sure I want to do one of these three things. Could you help me figure out, not just go to college, but like what should my major be, and how do I figure out who has the best programs for this? That's where the power is going to be.
If I had a dollar for every time I heard somebody say, "Oh, I wish I got better counseling," or like, "I wish
Yes.
I'd learned more from my counselor," or "I wish they weren't as swamped," if anything. I feel like
It's a
those are
big
definitely.
part of my doctoral studies because I think it's one of the worst and biggest gaps in America and probably globally. I'm looking deeply at the function of like career guidance and exploration in high schools, and can we use something like artificial intelligence and large language models to supplement the work of a counselor? I don't think you should replace the humans, but by God, if there are ways that we can speed them up, make them more efficient, and give and more equitable access, like you don't have to wait 6 months to meet with your counselor. You could potentially like chat with an LLM or like avail yourself of some catalog. It doesn't have to be AI, but like technology. There are tools here that we could be bringing more of this stuff to students without them having to wait. And then you only get a 20-minute appointment, and that's it.
Yeah, and if you weren't going to say, I was going to say, yeah, leverage that technology at the end of the day. I truly believe the generation like after me knows how to do technology way better than I do. I could give them anything and they'll figure it out. They'll find a way to make it work. And I'm just like, that's exactly what people need to leverage at the end of the day. And I might go on a random tangent. I've had this like startup idea. I've told this idea to a million people and like nobody has come back and done it. Maybe Perry should do it. But you know how like the parallel of students having these like report cards and being able to keep track of like their involvement in volunteering and like career days and everything. Like as like somebody who works in corporate for for the past a lot of years now, we have like performance reviews, right? Like we literally go into work, we do stuff, and we have performance review, whether it's every 6 months or 12 months, whatever it is. The thing that is missing is the connection from one place to another. Because, like, of course, there's lifers who have like the same career throughout their whole life, but very often there's also people who have different roles with different companies over the years. And for me to be talking about this random startup idea, to be like, if somebody manages to connect all of it, like having this system that you could track all your performance reviews from everywhere you've worked, wherever it is, that's a great idea, isn't it? Just to be able to have this. The only reason I'm mentioning this because like I could see the parallel and not being able to give people the tools and the potential to keep track of it.
And yeah, I think the power in something like that would be like if there is that opportunity for reflection. But you got to be careful because garbage in, garbage out is an old, tech saying about your data. And so if you have a not great supervisor, or like I happen to have a really great supervisor right now, but I've had some in the past that like didn't hardly write anything on my performance reviews. Like I knew I was killing it. They told me I was killing it. You're doing a great job, Lindsay. But my performance review might have been like 3 words, like they were just like, oh, I don't need to spend time on this because Lindsay's doing well. Um, so yeah, you would just have to be careful, I think, to think about, you know, the data, making sure that the data is actually good across those experiences. But I like the idea of having that more holistic kind of composite picture of yourself and your career and your life. And some schools are trying to do that. There's some consortium schools in New York City and others that make students do these like almost like presentations and then these like 360 evaluations. Like instead of a report card, it's like, let's sit down, let's discuss this as a group. What are your strengths? What do you need to work on? But like you said, like once they leave that school, it's not like they have that probably anymore. So yeah, I'd say as long as it was valuable data and you didn't get stuck with like people who didn't write very much, or I don't know if you've ever had this experience, if you've ever had a manager who wrote stuff that you didn't agree with and like you knew you were right. You're like, okay, this is maybe a very hands-off manager who you only meet with once a month and doesn't actually really have a really good picture of your work. I've only had that happen like once very early in my career. So I wouldn't necessarily like trust that data, right? Like you're not evaluating from a strong positionality of really understanding my work, or you're just checking some boxes. But yeah, I think if you had good reviews and they were extensive and honest and fair and valuable. If you had valuable data to track throughout your life, I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, and even the fact that if you're exposing that to people at a slightly younger age already, that's even more experience, or more great, like I guess maybe habit, if anything, to be able to see those events happen and really just make the most out of them, right? Whether you are correct or not correct on whichever side you end up on that one, that's always something that I think about a lot. Where, hey, yeah, I could definitely take a class on this if somebody's willing to teach it, and it seems like NAF is teaching a lot of those left and right on that. I want to take a second, real quickly, to go over Otis. I don't even know if I say that correctly. The Open Data Index for schools, Otis on that. That blew my mind. The reason I say this is that it's open. It's up there. It's like you. There's a website that I'll obviously share down all in the fun links, everything. But you can go on there, and you already mentioned these like variables and this valuable demographic information, for example, between like on a school level, on an academy level, and that is like incredible to think about. With a product like that, in the sense of engagement, do you get a lot of feedback from students, parents, or like school representatives about that product, or how is that being perceived at the moment in terms of how it's helping people be better at school?
Yeah, it's a newer product, and I would say it's really been more. I'd say most of the feedback that I'm aware of is more from that like research community or the higher education community or policymakers. Like that's the real audience. This is one of our only tools where the audience is not really focused at high school students and parents and teachers, for instance. Although of course they can still use it if they're interested, but this is really to help kind of shift the field. It's a tool for the field that helps us shift the narrative a bit, where we don't just have a single data point to talk about students or communities, which is usually like the the free and reduced lunch is a thing that gets talked about. This is a little bit more of that holistic picture, and so yeah, there's been some great reception and partnerships that we've had with higher education organizations and research and policy organizations. It's definitely exciting tool. Anytime that you can create something that's not just used but helps shift a narrative, I think that's really where you see true impact. And so, really proud of the team for putting that together.
I was gonna say it's that engagement that is so valuable at the end of the day, where people are willing to participate. Obviously, the data has to come from somewhere and participate into that, just because they know it helps a community. If you look at, you could filter it by state if you want in that index. You could filter it by XYZ. At the end of the day, it really gives, as you're saying, like a more holistic picture of whether somebody wants to make better decisions for which program comes next, which programs come in 5 years, 10 years, kind of thing. It really does help on that. But I think thanks to the power of technology, we get to be able to play around with a lot of stuff, and especially NoPro as well. That's another great product, if anything. Maybe who asked for these products? And of course, like the demand is there. You guys are impacting so many people, but let's talk about NoPro though. Maybe the story behind it, like of course who asked for it, but maybe just the origin, the birth of NoPro.
Yeah, great question. Um, so, kind of the origin story of NoPro. It both kind of starts with my arrival at NAF, but certainly precedes my arrival at NAF 3 years ago. The who asked for it. I think it was a combination of our leadership here at our nonprofit. Wanted to be able to expand our reach, even though I believe we're the largest network of academies, career academies in the country. That's still just a drop in the bucket of the amount of high school students that there are in America, right? So we know that we're not reaching as many students as that needs us, and the only way to scale to that level would be to figure out some mechanism for digitizing or having a digital aspect of some of this experience. You can't turn it all digital, but like that kernel of that question of which pieces of this could be technofied and brought into that virtual space was something that our NAF leadership had really been thinking about, and our board of directors, and I'm sure our schools had been asking for as well. And so when I showed up almost 3 years ago, in a couple weeks actually, so like in 2 weeks it'll be my 3 year anniversary, and I was given that blank slate a bit that I talked about earlier. I was told, you need to reach 100,000 students. You need to use technology to do it, and you need to take a piece of what NAF does really well, which is work-based learning, and make that the focus of this technology. And then that was it. That was all I was told. They were like, go be great, hire a team, a small team, have some resources, not enough resources. We're like a startup within this well established company. Um, And so we set out and we recruited teachers and students from all across the country, and we really listened to them. We enrolled them in the process of co-design. So we really asked them, and we did some surveys and labor market scans to see like what products are out there, where are the gaps. Let's survey people to see what their needs are. Um, let's, like I said, talk to these teachers and students that we are paying, of course, and like have enrolled in this process of co-design. And what really started to emerge was that problem I talked about earlier of like only 2% of students are getting an internship. And I think NAF and other companies have had this idea for a while of like internship in a box. Like, oh, it'll be so easy. Just use technology and you can like wave a wand and somehow every kid can have like an online internship. That's not realistic. You just have to think about the what it would take for a company to manage all of that. And still, it's still managing people. It's still having projects for them to work with. It's still coordinating paychecks and just doing so much. So like the idea that you can just like 100x or 1,000x internships with technology, we're just not there yet. And it's mostly having nothing to do with the technology. It's the people pieces. It's the part that's hard, right? And so we tried to say like, what is the piece of an internship that is one of the more valuable things that we could use technology to bring and scale to thousands, if not millions of students. And for us, what emerged is that this idea of that like real world problem, that real world project. Like if you're lucky and you get an internship while you're in high school and even college, and they don't ask you to just make coffees all day for people go on coffee runs and then make copies at the copy machine, and you actually get to do a thing and then present on it, that's where you're going to get to learn like PowerPoint, and you might get to learn some Excel and put together a database or a spreadsheet and like learn a little something. So that's what most people say was the more valuable piece of an internship, that and the name on their resume. So that has always been a bit of an inspiration for me ever since my first resume said Chuck E. Cheese, as you heard. I changed it on my LinkedIn to say CEC Incorporated, which is like their stock symbol, because I didn't want people to see Chuck E. Cheese on my resume. Um, Shout out to Chuck E. Cheese. I did love them. They were great. Their pizza at the time was fantastic. But, I was worried that that was not going to not only open doors for me, but it might close some, that there might be this perception that that wasn't a real job. And so, that social capital proxy, the thing that we put on our resume speaks for us before we ever enter into a room. It is massively important. And most high school students are graduating with a blank resume or something that says Chuck E. Cheese or that I was a babysitter or that I volunteered at my church. And not so surprising, a lot of the doors are closed to them. So a few of my colleagues at NAF and I kind of were brainstorming around that idea of, is there something we can build with technology to give them those two pieces of an internship without them ever having to leave a room, without them having to interview? A lot of kids interview in high school and are not the best speakers, or their English isn't that strong, or they're just not confident and they have anxiety. That's a lot of kids, right? And most of these internship programs involve interviews. You have to sit down and interview and be chosen. And like, what a horrible experience if you're not the one chosen. So I wanted to get rid of all that. I wanted to like remove the friction, as we say in product and tech. Like, what's the friction that is stopping kids from getting a great internship? They have to commute there. They have to leave school. That means you have to have all your credits ready. That means only like quote unquote the good kids, the smart kids, the kids with good grades are allowed to leave the building and go on an internship, because the other kids like me were in our remedial classes. I was doing makeup classes all the time. I was very absent from high school. So I never would have got to leave the building. So I wanted to remove that friction. Let's not make them leave the building. And then let's not make them interview. And then let's let them do something real. And then let's let them get an awesome company's name on their resume, like Lenovo or Amex or KPMG, right? These like household names of companies that are going to open doors for them. And let's let them do it all from a Chromebook or a computer, 100% for free. And it has to be done either in school or at home, where your school is not the barrier, but they could be the entry point. So that was kind of the genesis and the birth of NoPro. And I'm really, really proud of it. It's probably the thing in my career I'm most excited about. And we launched it about 9 months ago. So it's already out into all 50 states, DC, Puerto Rico. We're really excited about it and starting to see it grow, but it's something so cool and very different than most other products on the market for sure.
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear about successful launches. That's my, I mean, like coming from maybe from the product side, tech side, whatever it is, but like happy launches because successful launches, like it's so good to hear. How are people using it nowadays? How does it integrate with their day-to-day lifestyle?
Yeah, so there's two different offerings in NoPro. So I'd say one is called Skill Builders. Students log in and 10 minutes a day, they can do a short activity. It's going to be something that helps them build what NAF calls our future ready skills. So it's going to be something that helps them build problem solving, communication, collaboration, or social awareness skills. Those are the ones we focus on. Just a short little burst of an activity. And they'll usually have a video or something that comes with it that teaches them about a new topic or something that's fun and engaging in the world, but might introduce them to a new career. For instance, if you didn't know what a craniofacial surgeon was, like certainly you will never become one. And so those are really short activities. In teacher speak, we call them like a do now or a bell ringer. It's the thing that you sit down and do at the very beginning of a class. So teachers love them because they get kids busy right away. Students love them because they can do them on their phones at home or while they're in school, and have those little quick wins. So one winner a day gets $100 cash. And every student who completes one wins a certain amount of points, 10 no pro points that gets them into like weekly and monthly raffles for cash and prizes and things that we're building up to, like PlayStations that, most teenagers are pretty excited about. So that's how they're entering into a skill builder. It's either kind of like usually a warm up for their day or their class or an after school activity, or some kids are doing it on their phone, like riding the subway to school or in the back of their car or bus for school. They're just logging in because it's 100% free. So they can just create their own account and log in and like check out this new little micro problem of the day and get exposed to some learning and kind of build their portfolio like one tiny piece at a time. So that's skill builders. And then the other thing is our industry challenges. So this is a usually month-long project that is kind of like that internship project I was telling you about. This is that thing that goes on the resume with a really impressive name next to it, a company name. And this is where we work with those companies like Lenovo to say, like, what's a real problem in your industry? And how could young people solve it? And so we've created all the curriculum and the videos are there, and we know our audience. So they're short TikTok style videos. No video is more than 5 minutes. Most are only a minute or two. Short articles, like really exposing you to these concepts in artificial intelligence or environmental sustainability, like whatever the problem is. It rotates every month, and all the stuff is made for you. So a lot of teachers just put it right into their classrooms and make it a lesson or make it, like a unit that they would do in school. Some do it for after school or summer school, and some kids are still doing it at home. You could work on it on yourself, on your own, or form a group. Um, but they get to choose how they want to solve the problem, and we teach them how to create either a marketing campaign, a business pitch, or a new product, a physical or digital product. So even though the topic changes every month, they always get to come back to that idea of, oh, I actually think the way I want to solve this problem is like awareness. I'm going to create a viral video that goes viral on TikTok and like make people aware of this issue in clinical health care and research or something, like whatever the topic is. And every month we get to pick a winner. We have 3 groups that win and share $10,000 in cash. So it's really, really cool. I get to sit down once a month with these companies who get to pick the winners of all the national semifinalists. And the work is incredible. These kids come up with these amazing ideas. Like I'm sure you can imagine, these teenagers are so creative and they'll just blow your minds with the ideas that they come up with. And then I get to be sometimes on the call when we tell them that they've won, and it's just super cool to see their excitement, man.
I know when you're an adult, you work and everything, and it sounds very just boring the whole time. But trust me, there are people who actually like doing the work because the practical problems that you get to solve on a day to day basis, that would drive some people to that. And then what NAF is doing with No Pro, you could correct me or not, is that you're really just picking the fun part of being an adult working in the
Oh, heck
corporate
yeah.
world, and then just like putting it into into like a kid's like curriculum.
That's like one of the main words that people mention, students and teachers mention, is the fun. The fun, the creativity, like when do we get to do this with our students? And it's still all standards aligned and it'll fit into my classroom, and my principal will be happy that we're spending time on this and they're learning real concepts. But yeah, it's fun. Like we just squash the fun out of things when we make them sit and fill in bubble sheets and prep for a test. And I just don't think it's like we are anesthetizing them of all of their joy and all of their connection to the real world. Like I sat and wrote so many 5 paragraph essays, and I'm an English major. I like to write, but so much of the writing I did in school, I hated it. It was boring. It wasn't connected to any of my own goals or the things I wanted to be writing about. And I just don't think that's what school should be. So I'm really excited to see how many schools are passionate already, even though we just launched. They're really excited about No Pro. We've got a whole first wave of educator ambassadors who are coming because they're so excited about No Pro. They want to help share the word about it, and their students winning. Like one of our teachers just told us that one of his students a few months ago won second place in one of the no pro competitions each month, and second place gets $3,000. And he said, it was a young woman student. He said, yeah, she was a senior. She was going off to college, and that let her buy a used car so she could drive to school. I was like, that is so cool. And then another one told us that one of his students that he had had the most trouble with, the student was really disengaged, never, almost never participated in class, and mostly just because the student had a really like low self confidence. That student won a skill builder. $100. I know it's only $100, but the confidence boost because they all like clapped for him in class and announced it and like put it on the board, and he got that $100. And he said it like turned him around, like even outside of NoPro. Like he had stopped using NoPro at that point, but he was engaging more and taking more chances and speaking up in class. And I just thought that was really cool too. So not just the fun, but the confidence boost of like, even if you don't win, I could finish a project and it goes on my resume. These kids, some of them already have Lenovo, Amex, like KPMG, the Patrick McGovern Foundation. Like they've got multiple of these on their resumes, and they're only like in 10th or 11th grade. Like that's amazing. They're already like stacking their LinkedIn better than I was before I was in grad school.
I think one thing that is actually really cool is I do get the opportunity to ask you how some of this stuff maybe is built at the end of the day. I feel like that's something that I always think about, to be like nothing grows by itself in a beautiful field out there and you get to just pick it up and everything. So I'm sure Nopra has also gone the journey of like, if we go into I guess like corporate speak, the BRDs, the business requirement documents, the product requirement documents, and then the technical design documents, all that kind of fun stuff. But very maybe like in I guess more layman term, if anything, more Perry term, if anything, is how did that product maybe come to life, in the sense of, was it just do an MVP, build a technology, and see if it works out there with like a small amount of people, or was there a lot like blueprinting behind it? Like this is the part where I get to be a little bit more geeky about this stuff.
Yeah. So we went through, we're big kind of like, test quick and in-house folks. So we did a lot, of course, of the original like UX and product design steps of co-creating with those teachers and students. Most of our stuff, we weren't coding a single line yet for months, right? We were working in Figma, we were working in Miro, putting together all the storyboards and all the flows and these like kind of, medium high fidelity prototypes that are even sometimes clickable, to let students tell us like what was missing, was this fun yet. And so we definitely did a few months of that kind of early, almost like digital paper based prototyping and testing, which I highly recommend. And then we moved into that earlier MVP phase, and started to build the prototype. We hoped we might be able to find something on the market that we could just pay for instead of having to build it, because sometimes building it yourself can be more expensive and time consuming. We didn't really find anything that was exactly what we needed. A lot of the other like LMSs or learning management systems on the market, or like training portals, they weren't quite right for what we wanted. That more like game like almost experience where there's like your points and your dashboards. And a really important part of No Pro is we get to have mentors help students in their journey. So they're answering students' questions anonymously on the platform so that it's safe and compliant with privacy laws. But nobody else that we found had that ability to have like an anonymous mentor that we vetted, of course, give students answers about their drafts or questions, or look at their video before the due date and give them feedback. And so we knew we were going to have to build that. So then we just started building like, what are the core components. And some people think there's this kind of, I think, misconception in product that like, oh, build just a tiny piece of it, so like build one wheel and see if they like a unicycle. But if you want them to be on two wheels at the end, and that, like, I don't think you should do it that way. I think you should go ahead and get like, what's the sketchiest, rinkiest, dinkiest bicycle that you could put together, but let them try a bicycle. Don't stick them on one pretty wheel.
I absolutely love that analogy. That's coming from somebody obviously that have seen go wrong, where it's like, oh, just worry about the handlebars, you'll be fine. Just worry about the horn on it, you'll be fine. And next thing you know, nothing's put together, right? It doesn't run, it doesn't do anything. So I love that example more than
Yeah, so
anything.
we got them on the early bicycle. We're still trying to figure out, adding brakes, and we're still early in this process. You have to kind of balance, you have to drive enough users to help drive your funding, which we're fortunate to have. And then you have to kind of like constantly load balance, because you can't spend so much on like site integrity and site stability and spend all your money there without creating some new engaging features for users. But if you're over creating and features, then your site may not be stable and secure, or it can't handle the bandwidth that you're driving if you go from 500 users one day to 5,000 the next day. It's just this constant iteration, like constantly thinking about what do we need to do now? Like, oh, we need two-factor authentication for this thing, or we have to have, this feature for teachers to create like a class code, which is pretty common in ed tech, right? Like they need an easier way to see all their students' work without having to like email each other links to their dashboard or something like that. So like you evolve it and you listen to your users. Like we listen to what were they asking for. We listen to, we look at where is the world heading, like things with AI or other things, like what is going to become table stakes, like where are we going to have a certain level of, cybersecurity or privacy protection or legal protection. All of those things kind of get patched in as they need to when you're a startup starting from scratch like we are.
Oh, I could definitely imagine. Don't get me started on tech dev, if anything.
Oh
Don't get me
man,
started on the 20
it's
years backlog
huge.
of
Yeah,
tech
it's
dev.
massive. It's massive. It scares me to look at.
But it's so fun to put in perspective because you guys are going through so much of those hurdles so that people can use the product, so that people can have a good experience using it with the front end, the design of everything behind it is, yeah, make it seamless with everything. So many platforms. You guys are doing mobile, you guys are doing web. Am I correct? Like, is it React, Swift, Kotlin, like, and then backend is, I'm assuming, maybe Java, Python are probably popular nowadays. Like, what am
It's
I
a
saying?
mix
Am
of
I?
things. We've got some React, we've got some PHP. It really depends. Each product's a little different. It'd be nice if we had some like unified ecosystem, but again, you're creating different products for different users, funded by different people, worked on by different teams. So we're working. One of the things that I'm trying to help is to bridge and bring together that ecosystem of all these different products. But for no pro, it's a lot of like PHP and some React, of course, JavaScript, and we're doing a lot with like a headless CMS called Contentful. So that's where we're doing a lot of like our publishing because it's a very content heavy product. Every single day we publish a new skill builder. And every month we're publishing this like multi-page industry challenge full of like multimedia and video. And so there's a lot of updates and publishing happening literally every single day on the front end and on the content side.
Yeah, I was gonna say, especially the part where maybe localization, because of course all different languages of Spanish, English, all that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah,
So
all things that we're trying to work on more. We get that request a lot too, like even for like some of the more native translation versus having to have like Google Translate handle it. But all things that go on your backlog and you figure out how to prioritize based on a variety of things and feasibility and cost and risk and just need. We're really driven by like what can take this to the next level for students. We're not interested in being a feature factory. You're not going to see no pro like, oh, new feature every month. Like that's not what drives us. We may not need one for a few months if that's not what students and teachers need or what our business partners need.
I want to come back to Lindsay for just a quick second, or maybe just to like share is that there's so many things happening on NAF, left and right, engaging with the students and participating into a lot of these like skill builder activities and also just building a lot of products. So maybe top three favorite applications that keep your life together. People, you could say what calendar that you use, or maybe you have a really good note taking app. Whatever you feel like that is a good shout out for your top favorite apps that runs your life.
I have a few of them. My favorite project and quasi product management platform is Asana. I know folks love Jira. I prefer Asana hands down. So luckily, NAF and Urban Assembly and a few my other company, Global Aurea, ed tech company, we all use Asana to track our worlds and to keep all of our projects and going and work with external consultants. We can create all of our like engineering tickets with any external engineers and invite them just to that particular board. So Asana keeps me running. I am a voracious calendar blocker. So even though I hate most Microsoft products and I have to use them here at NAF, I prefer, Gmail and Google products by far. So shout out to Google Docs is my main favorite thing. But I'm a calendar blocker. So every 15 minutes of my day is planned and I remix it. If this call went long, I would add more time to my calendar and I would think about anytime I say, oh yeah, I've got to do that. I stop. My supervisor, Colleen, and I I'm joking to her, like, hold on, I have to put that on my calendar or it won't happen. So my calendar is a massive tool. I'm a huge inbox zero proponent as well. So like I like to get to zero in emails at the end of the day, and that keeps me very productive. At least emails I have to do anything with. If I might leave it in there if I know I'm going to look at it tomorrow. Um, but huge inbox zero. And then there's a great app I love called Matter, Matter, Matter app. They're a really fantastic reader that allows you to like save all of your articles to read for later. It's just a really slick, intuitive app and has some great like Google Chrome plugins. It's just a very enjoyable reading experience where I don't have to have, like I would normally, 8,000 browsers open because I want to keep all those articles I want to read for the day. I just save them to Matter, and then whenever I have a moment, I'll go out and read it. And they recommend some good articles. They've got fantastic highlighting capabilities. So if I just want to highlight something in case I want to search for it later or tag it, that's fantastic. And that's I think something that was just launched a couple years ago, but they're really good. Those are probably my faves. I've certainly have others, but those would be the ones that keep Lindsey going. If I couldn't live without anything else, it would be some of those.
I'm so glad. I love asking this question. I love hearing people talk about that because we all do stuff slightly differently, but you have great concrete examples of how it makes your life better at the end of the day. Um, this is the one for, I guess, the people in maybe on the fence of going into. I mean, of course, go to a NAF Academy. That wasn't the question. The question was definitely go check out the NAF Academy. But more in the perspective of, do I want to work into education? Do I work into tech? Do I want to work into tech education? A lot of what you did, for decades, if anything, is what would you say to people on that fence where even the side of like, should I go like just work for corporate at the end of the day, or should I do nonprofit? Like, what are some general North Stars that you followed throughout your life that you could like help people out with?
It's funny. I had someone call me yesterday for an informational interview. Um, and she's head of product and has been, but she's been very corporate. And so she's trying to figure out, like, how do I even break into the nonprofit space? So I'd say, especially if you're earlier in your journey, try different things. This is where a great internship can come in handy. Try a couple different internships or ask for those informational interviews. Like, go ask, what is the environment like? Like, I know I will never work in an office again, and I've got enough skills and swag in my career now to be able to wait and find the opportunity that knows that I'm going to be really amazing working from home. But you may not know that about yourself if you don't ever like try to explore it. Or same with corporate. Like, I tried corporate for a couple months and I hated it. So that's the only way to learn. I mean, there's only so much somebody can tell you. So certainly the informational interviews were going to point you in the right direction, but you got to go explore it. It's like all the way back to Oregon Trail. You got to get on the trail. You got to get out there and try it for yourself. If you can't, then at least go on YouTube, watch day in the life videos. Really try to get a better sense of what you want to do, and think about what drives you. Like, for me, what drives me, my core values are integrity and service to other people. And so I thought, like, where can I be of most service? And that's led me to nonprofits. There's absolutely nothing wrong. I grew up very economically unstable. There's nothing wrong with saying I want a lot of money too. I want to make sure that I can help my own family and be economically stable. And you may or may not find better ability to do that in corporate. Some nonprofits pay really well, others don't. That's not why you should come to a nonprofit, for sure. But I don't think there's anything wrong saying, like, the impact I want to have is I want to use my money for good and I need to make a lot of money to do that. Um, and there's certainly other things that separate nonprofit life from corporate life, but obviously those are some of the bigger ones. So yeah, try it out. I mean, get into get into tech or get into education. Mix the two. You don't have to have a single story about who you are, and our students don't have to have a single story about who they are, where they came from. It's where they're going, and it's not a straight line. It's going to be very, very not a linear journey. So just enjoy the journey. Collect those badges, whether it's like a video game or a Girl Scout patch, like, go try something, do a project. That's why check out NoPro. Like, I don't care if you're an adult, you can't win, but like, go look at some of those projects and be like, oh man, I really missed the mark. I would have loved to explore how to use like AI for environmental science. Like, that's super cool. Maybe that's my calling in life. Like, just go try to find those. Like, let your gut lead you. Don't just chase money or just chase prestige, although I know those are important things. Like, there's so many studies that show that people are so much happier when they feel like they're able to use their skills and they feel like they're able to make a difference, so that they're like proud of their work or that they're sought after for what they're good at. Most people say they would rather take a pay cut and be able to do those things and work on things that they really care about. And I think that's true.
Couldn't have said it better myself. But speaking of NAF, where can people find NAF? Where can people find more about Lindsey and NAF at the end of the day?
Well, hey, so that's easy for both. NAF is naf.org. Sounds NAF rhymes with laugh. And I really hope folks come check us out, because that's how you're going to learn about all of our amazing products and programs and how to become part of the NAF community. It's a really, really impactful, amazing place to be and to work. To find Lindsey Dixon, look me up on LinkedIn. Very busy with NoPro, but also school and other projects and things in my life. I have a newsletter I'm writing, not often enough, called AI Apprentice. You can sign up for that. And yeah, you'll just find me here trying to help keep NAF and in the innovation space that it's in, and helping reach more students.
And of course, all of that will be shared in the description notes below on the episode. But on behalf of myself and on behalf of everybody, thank you so much for telling us about all the products at NAF. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks so much, Perry. It's great to meet you.
And I will catch you guys on the next one. See you later. Bye. And that was Lindsey Dixon, Vice President of Product and Innovation at NAF. All the links are shared in the description notes below. Go check them out. If you would like to be on Podcast Room by a Software Engineer, reach out to us. Just email contact@perrytiu.com. Can't wait to have you on the show. Once again, thank you so much for listening to Podcast Room by Software Engineer. Don't forget to hit the follow button on your podcast app and leave us a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It's completely free. And if you want to tell your friends about Podcast Room by Software Engineer, that's totally cool as well. Anyways, I am Perry Tiu, and I'll catch you on the next one. Big love.